Prepare to go live.
Are live. Okay.
Lee?
Hello, everybody. Ready to get started?
Hey.
Yeah, just making sure you are. Looks
Oh,
like
no,
you
no,
were
no.
in prison, being held hostage for a second.
I didn't blink, so that gave it away. But hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. This is our 4th episode of Wind Down Wednesday. I'm Lee Edwards, and we are joined by 2 amazing people and a special guest as well.
Aisha Jefferson, hello. Welcome back to Wednesday, Wind Down Wednesday with NABJ Chicago.
And I'm Will Jones, the final member of this crew.
And we are joined tonight by the amazing Zuri Berry. I'm so glad to have you with us. So to begin, we're going to do a little house cleaning things. We're going to just jump right into the conversation. Is that cool?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks. And thanks for having me.
Also, just make sure we're being correct. Do you mind sharing your pronouns with us as well?
He, him.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So to begin with, we have a lot of new members. So thank you so much for everyone, or to everyone who joined NABJ Chicago chapter recently. We're so glad to have you. Elections are coming up, and Aisha, can you tell us a little bit about that and what it means to be a member of NABJ Chicago and about the upcoming elections?
Sure. So basically, the elections, we just closed registration. So for full members, so those of you who did register, the polls will start. They will open, I suppose. You'll be able to. See, I still got the presidential elections on my brain. Basically, you will be able to vote May 1st through May 20th, 11:59 p.m. on May 20th. So, remember that, not at midnight, 11:59 p.m. on May 20th. You will. That's when the election will end, and I think a day or two later we'll have the results and we will share them with you. You can go to nabj.org/election to see all of the candidates, all positions, all board positions are up, and you can look and review and vote for the candidates who you feel are worthy of this glorious organization. We're Chicago. We are the 3rd largest city. We are the 2nd city. And it's important that our organization represents all of the wonderful journalists at every level that we have. And so, we're really working hard to do that. And we encourage, you, if you're a member, to continue your membership. And if you know other journalists who maybe fell off a little bit or who are a little curious, encourage them to join and join our organization, just take part in a lot of the wonderful content and things that we have going on. Now, Lee, what are you looking forward to during your next term as VP of Digital?
Thanks.
If you're elected.
If elected.
Right.
Well, I believe I'm running unopposed, but my hope
Write-in
is
candidates.
I'm sorry? Oh,
Yes.
write-in? Well, I welcome them. I welcome all those people. In fact, tomorrow we're going to have our candidates forum on Zoom from 7 to 8. So we had to plug that. So if you want to learn about the candidates and everyone who's going to be participating in our election, tomorrow night at 7 p.m., we're going to have a whole conversation about what to expect from the candidates who are running for office. I'll save my big spiel for that, but I'm happy to be running for NABJ's Vice President of Digital. I think it's a great opportunity to uplift and highlight, journalists of all backgrounds, both beginners to veterans and our Hall of Famers. So I'm excited for that. But really, I want to kick it to you now, Will. Can you tell us about the scholarships that NABJ has available?
So we have more than $10,000 worth of scholarships that we're trying to give out. We started opening up more than 10,000. More than 10,000. This is like the largest number that we've ever given out. And the applications are due Friday. They are due Friday. Don't miss out on this free money. I know as someone who graduated with some student loan debt, scholarships really, 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 really help, and it could save you a lot of money in the long run. So get those applications in. If you have any questions about what you need to apply, you can hit me up via email, will@nabjchicago.org. But again, we're giving out $10,000. I can't say that enough. So we've had some people apply already. It is not too late. So make sure you get those emails with the applications attached to me by Friday. And I'll be one of the people looking over and figuring out who gets what.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you so much for that. And we're so happy that, you know, there's so many opportunities available to journalists of all ages, but this one's for our college students, so please apply. And now, without further ado, I'd like to just welcome Mr. Berry to join us for this segment of Wind Down Wednesday. And I know you have done a lot in your career. So can you tell us, Zuri, about some of the things that you've done and how you so matriculated through media?
Yeah, and let me just reiterate my thanks again to all of you for the invite to be on this, you know, panel, this episode. And it's such a great thing to see a vibrant chapter like the Chicago chapter doing its thing. So thank you so much for the invite.
You're a former chapter president, right?
Yeah, that's right. In Sacramento, vice president in the Boston chapter. You know, I've made my way around a little bit, so I certainly know the tough work that goes into that on a day-to-day basis. So for those of you that are considering running to be in leadership positions, you know, it's a volunteer job, if you will. You got to think of it in those terms, but there's so much joy that you get out of it in terms of helping people, connecting with people, especially as people come into the market. So that's always fun. It was such a nice thing to be able to help onboard colleagues. So I thought that was always great. And, you know, I've missed it a little bit, and I've been away just for a little bit because I went back and got my MBA. But yeah, it was a good time, especially with the Boston chapter. I was with them for a very long time. But to answer your question, Lee, yeah, I started in this business wanting to be a sports reporter. I was a sports writer for a little newspaper called The Union in Grass Valley, California. It's in the gold rush town, you know, what they call Niner country, you know, the 49ers, obviously people leaving to California for the gold rush. Anyways, it looks just sort of like that, if you will, still from that time. It's rural-ish. It's got a little flavor to it, but it's a two high school kind of town. And I was a sports writer and columnist there. And I transitioned to the news side there after about a year or so, covering their first weed dispensary and things like that. And then I made the jump from there to the Boston Globe. And part of the reason why I was able to make that jump, and this is such a good place to talk about this, by the way, is because of my connections at NABJ. I got in touch with a guy by the name of Greg Lee, who was a former president of the association. And he and I connected to the Sports Journalism Institute. And I continued to sort of work with him. I ended up developing or working on the website for SJI. I'm an SJI alum. And so, you know, we were working on these things, and he was seeing what I was doing while I was in Grass Valley in this little, you know, town with at a newspaper of 15,000 circulation. You know, I was shooting video, I was doing live events, I was having community sit downs with people. You know, I took on the role as online community manager. I launched their social media profile. So when Twitter came around, I launched that for them. I did their Facebook. I did all that stuff for them. And so he was seeing all of this, and he was like, well, we just had this opening. You know, at the time, ESPN was launching all of its regional sites. And so they launched ESPN Boston, and they were poaching people from the Globe. And they were like, we need somebody who can come in and do a little bit of everything like what you're doing down in Grass Valley. And so, you know, I went up and interviewed and beat out 8 other candidates for the role. And that was a big deal for me. And obviously it took me from being somebody who was thinking about leaving the business because I wasn't making enough money in Grass Valley. I can tell you, my last wage, I was making like $17 an hour. It was not working for me. And then being able to actually support myself in this industry. So I thought that was a huge thing for me. And I stayed at the Globe for almost 5 years. I was at a sports writer doing high school sports. I was doing the Celtics. I was doing Red Sox, everything. But then I ended up gravitating and sticking to Patriots coverage. So I was able to cover a Super Bowl. I did a couple of Stanley Cup finals, a World Series, all these different major events. Actually, when I first got there, I think it was the second championship run for the Celtics, in which they ended up losing to the Los Angeles Lakers. I covered that NBA finals. So I was able to do all these major sporting events. And that was such a great experience. But as the industry started to change, you saw that the New York Times company wanted to offload all of these regional papers and other things that they had going on. And so they offloaded the Globe, and they were able to be sold to a local owner, which I think everybody sort of is, happy about when they see like the billionaire that comes and buys the newspaper, so to speak. And that was John Henry, who so happened to own the Boston Red Sox. But there was I would say, an issue that sort of came along with that. They didn't really know what to do with, for instance, all of these digital people. Like we had this like robust digital operation, 30 something people in the Boston.com newsroom. Okay. That was the second largest newsroom in New England behind the Boston Globe itself. And so all of these people, had different roles and whatnot. We had 5 or 6 people dedicated to sports. We had a whole entertainment desk, and we would do live chats, we do video, we did all these different things that sort of supplemented what was daily news and regular investigative reporting and other types of coverage that came out of the newspaper. And so the new management that sort of took over didn't really understand the full complexity of the news organization. And I think they made some stumbles in terms of how to deal with the staff and how to deal with talent. And what we saw at that time was a huge exodus. And so I had all these friends that were like leaving to, WBUR and to, GBH and to all these other different places. And, it got to a point for me where it was sort of very frustrating, because then they started asking us to sort of change our work, which is not something that's unheard of, but it was difficult at the time to sort of grasp, if you will, because they were basically saying, don't compete with the guys at the paper when I was doing Patriots coverage, which, I thought we all complimented each other. So I made the decision to leave. And at the time I wanted to move up and to do more. I didn't just want to be a sort of writer and video producer and things like that, which is what I did. I wanted to actually edit at that point in time, and edit in a more profound way. And so that option wasn't available to me at the Globe. So I started looking elsewhere, and immediately I got entertained from Fox 25, the local TV station there. And I thought TV was going to be awesome. And then I got into TV, and I tell you that I'll just be honest with you. It's a beast, it's an animal, and I didn't really like it.
Well, that's you. That's your area.
I'm just letting them speak, and then I'm going to pipe in. I just want to see where you're going to go.
It's hard.
But I was thinking.
When you're on the digital team for a TV outlet, like, I have mad respect for all the people that are in it. They bring in a lot of young people. They churn through a lot of young people. And, I give a lot of love to all the veterans that stick through it, because there's certainly those that are out there, but it's hard because you're dealing with the influx of everything. And I got to tell you, Boston, you have these weather events, and I know in Chicago you have your weather events too, but these extreme weather events was nothing like I'd ever experienced in terms of news coverage at the Globe. You're in a TV station, all of a sudden it's 24/7. And I'll tell you where my frustration boiled over is in February of 2015. I was, we were in like Snowmageddon, what they called it, 100 inches of snow within 1 month. And so every weekend there was a new snowstorm. I was staying at a hotel across the street from the station, and I was thinking to myself while I was going into work, I was like, we're updating these stories, and you know what? They're asking me to basically say the same thing over and over again in terms of an update or bringing something new about that there's snow falling. It was blowing my mind, like what that meant and what exactly I was doing with that and how I could make that somehow be creative and fresh and push that out to our listeners and readers. And so I had real trouble with that, and I ended up leaving there and getting pulled on to the Boston Herald, which I loved. I was at the Boston Herald, which, I'd never done a tabloid before. And I took over their video and social media operations. So I worked on video for them. I did some day-to-day editing. I did all the social media there, and I had a great time with them. And that sort of transition to, while you're doing all of that, can you also do this radio show for us? And can you, because they had an internet radio station, and that time was, I think, 2016. The election was sort of coming up, and all of these candidates were coming through the New Hampshire market, and the radio station was a great sort of clearinghouse for all of those people. So I think we got like 22 of the 24 candidates on air. The only two that we didn't get, you'd be surprised by this, were Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush. And we used to joke that the reason why Jeb Bush didn't win was because he never came on our show. So we had this like really robust operation in which we were sort of doing the show, and we were doing, all of these different things. And then, of course, the Herald, as for those that know, went bankrupt, which is always fun. And that sort of led me down to this path where I'm at now, which is they went bankrupt, and I said, I got to find some place that's stable because I need stable income. And so I looked at what's next. Now, I had been approached by some folks in public media before, but this was the first time that I had actually not only gone through the paces, but like really considered like whether or not I was going to stay in Boston and these different things. And so I got the opportunity to go to Charlotte at WFAE, where I was their managing editor. And I was handling newsroom stuff, but mainly the digital side of things. And that's where we, were able to do things like launch the She Says podcast and do a bunch of other stuff there. And it was a good run. I like Charlotte. North Carolina is great. But I found myself, wanting to get out of that station for different reasons. I felt like it was some difficulties there. And part of it, I think, was, me coming from a hard news and day-to-day daily news world. And I got to tell you, the irony of me saying this is that, I didn't like it so much with TV, but I loved it in newspapers. But when I went to public media, they thought it was like sort of bizarre, this sort of attention that I paid to the things that happen on a day-to-day basis and the things that I wanted to see out of our newscast and out of our news operation. And so I felt like there was some conflict there in that. And so I started looking elsewhere. And that's when I again was approached by another station to come to DC at WAMU. And WAMU was great and all that good stuff, but that didn't end well for me either. And just to be frank with you all, I was fired. And that was something that's like, how do you deal with that? How do you come back from that? All of those things. And, I don't have to sort of tell you anecdotally, but like, studies show, that people who have job loss or anything like that, that is the primary driver for entrepreneurship. That is what brings me to this point today. That doesn't mean I couldn't go back and find another job somewhere in public media or wherever else, but it also made me think like, I don't think that's really working for me, this corporate drive. Some of these places I've been, we haven't really meshed well in terms of values, in terms of sort of priorities, and then the politicking of it as well. So I thought about all of that, and I thought about what I wanted to do next. And I've taken the last sort of 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, really sort of building myself towards this next thing.
So I have a question. So I know you said that, getting fired, getting let go, that type of job loss is what prompted you to really give entrepreneurship a chance. But had you given it any thought or considered it before that? Like, when you were doing these great things at other outlets?
Yeah. So so let me step back to 2016, excuse me. I'm sorry, no, 2017. And that's when the Herald declared bankruptcy.
Okay.
That's when that really started clicking for me. It's like, okay, this isn't going to last long. What am I going to do about it? This industry is unstable, excuse me. So how am I going to look at my long-term prospects? And of course, it's either up or out, right? Mm-hmm. And sort of how you think about that. And at first I was on this track for up, but I really started thinking about, well, what's the landing spot, so to speak. And so when I went to North Carolina, I applied for an MBA program while I was there, because I wanted to sort of add to my skill set, so to speak. I didn't want to.
How does the MBA do that? So how does the MBA add to the skill set?
Yeah, so very frankly, I was thinking about, okay, one of these days I might be a chief content officer or a general manager or something of that nature. Like that was certainly in the cards, or at least something I was thinking about. And I wanted to make sure that when I got into that room where we start talking about budgets and we started talking about forecasting for the future and things of that nature, that I knew what I was talking about, that I was firm in my facts, that I, felt like I wasn't an imposter, which is, something that so many of us feel when we're not ready or prepared or something of that nature. But it transitioned, I think, over my time at Queens University. While I was going through the program, I started to think more and more like, okay, wait a second. There is some, creativity that I see out of both my classmates and others that speaks to this desire that I didn't know I had before to want to do something on my own. Okay. Some ownership that I wanted to take over my own life and my own sort of career in a way that I hadn't really considered before. And I'm sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt. No, because how do you prepare for that mentally? Because a lot of people, feel like, you
can't prepare for getting fired.
You're right. But get that resume ready. Get that LinkedIn updated.
Have your website up to date. That's all.
Right. But I meant mentally prepare, because when you know that this is something that you have to do, what do you say to yourself? Because a lot of people, they want to do different things. They may get inspired to try stuff, but they it may not work out. So what do you say to yourself to keep yourself?
Before you answer that, we have to say what you do, though. We haven't gotten to that, so it's like we're alluding to it.
Okay. Thank you, Will. Yeah, I was
sorry. You were breaking up just a little.
It's my Wi-Fi.
You guys.
My Wi-Fi is horrible. Can you all see me? Am I freezing?
Yes, I see you, Will.
Okay.
Aisha.
Okay.
I hear you again.
Okay.
I may be jumping ahead. I love this topic, and so
it's a great topic.
If I get a little ahead,
let's talk about your company and then how you got there.
Thank you, Will.
Sure. So, so now I do podcast development and audio production, right? So I took a long time to sort of figure out what the thing was that was going to be my business. Like I said, I've been thinking about it for 6-7 months, whatever it's been. And, the first initial thought was that, okay, well, you've been a writer. That's something that you've won awards for. You've done editing, maybe you could, work on newsroom strategy and do that kind of consulting work and whatnot. And I kept thinking about the sort of the competition that's in that space, the much more experienced journalists that are in that space that are doing that work, former editors and chiefs and news directors, et cetera, et cetera. So I started to really sort of try to come to a plan, if you will, of how I would package myself and put myself out there in a way that differentiates myself from others. And part of that has been my experience, obviously, not only as a storyteller in so many different mediums, but also in my last bit of experience in NPR member station newsrooms. So having that experience and having put together some great projects in the places that I've been and sort of knowing sort of the technical ins and outs, that's something I knew that I could pitch myself as to. And the more and more I looked at podcasting in particular, and it's something that, again, I'm sort of a fan of and sort of actually have experience going back all the way to my days in college. You know, that's like 15, 16 years ago at this point. The more I thought about it, the more I thought there's a lot of need for help in this space. And that's some help that I can bring, given my most recent experience, given my history, given all the things that I know as a journalist. So you think about all the tools that you have in your skill set, and you try to put that towards some good use in a way that's, I think, both helpful for others and that is packageable. So that's where I'm at now. So now I do, the company is called Zuri Media and Consulting, but it's primarily focused on podcast development and audio production, and I call it ZMC Podcasts.
And how is that going so far? How hard is it to build up a clientele?
Yeah, the conversion, it's hard. Let me tell you that. When people talk about the number of touch points you need with a potential client before you convert them, it's no joke. I mean, I don't do a business that I think is, you just go to the website and you sign up. There are several conversations that I have with these folks before we end up getting to that place where we sign a contract and we move forward. So, I've had my first couple of clients, some nonprofits. I've talked to some different folks in the venture capital space and some other players that have been able to sustain me. But it's certainly slow going, I think. And I think, that's typical of what you hear of entrepreneurs in their first couple of years. And so I'm not deterred by any of that. It's actually makes me excited that I'm able to hear from people so soon and so quickly. And once we sort of start putting out some of these projects that we've been working on, then I think things will pick up really, really nicely.
Can you then tell us a little bit about some of the new media tools you're using? Like, have you felt the urge to get on TikTok? I've seen your Instagram or your website. You're not a TikToker?
No. Listen, I'm also from one of those places, and where I was the sort of lead person digitally and on social media, and I was asked or tasked with sort of implementing that new social media tool whenever it came out. And so there's this evaluation that needs to take place to see if it's helpful for your organization or brand, right? That you have to go through and make sure that, is this going to be worth my time? Does this burnish my image in any kind of way that's helpful? And I think for folks that work in the audio only space like myself, like, it's not necessarily there yet. And also, what does it take away from? What time does that take away from? So I tried to launch, for instance, a Snapchat page for the Herald, and that was a disaster. and not because of maybe what you might think, but it was because, like, there was just no energy behind it from anybody on staff. And you can't force people into something that is like that or anything like that. But also, I think many news organizations outside of TV have seen that it hasn't really worked for them. Like, there's really a difficulty in trying to tell stories there in a way that works for them. If you're not working in a video capacity in any kind of way on a regular basis, it just doesn't make sense. And so, I do that for myself. I look at that and I think to myself, well, where should I put my attention? And I think about sort of specifically how to market my services. And so there are only a couple of places that are really worthwhile when it comes to that. And that this, is all changing because of, iOS 14.5 and whatever else. But like Facebook, Instagram, those are places where, my potential customers reside, my potential clients reside. And so that's where I have to put my attention. Twitter, to a lesser extent, it's more like a sort of thought leadership space, if you will. Mm-hmm. And again, you think about this for every single platform. How are you positioning yourself? LinkedIn too. Actually, I've got more referrals from LinkedIn than anywhere else.
So what are some things that you wish you knew before you got into the business, before you started making podcasts? And a viewer question is, what makes for a good podcast?
Okay, let me start with yours, Lee, and then we'll get to the viewer question. Thank you for that. So let's go back. I'm gonna start with the viewer question because what makes a great podcast? First, it's got to be great audio quality. I think that's immensely important, and I think it's undervalued by a lot of people who just jump into podcasting. They don't think about the microphone situation. They don't think about their recording situation, where they are. Most of us have been in a home studio for the past year, if you will. And so there is a real emphasis on getting dynamic microphones rather than condenser microphones. So that way, some of that low frequency humming, hissing noises are blocked out, and you're just getting that nice crisp, rich sound that you might get from your voice. So I think that that's one of the big pieces of it. The other piece I think is true of all podcasts is storytelling and bringing your authentic self. I think that is incredibly important. If you are not entertaining in any kind of way, it's really difficult to get into and support and keep coming back to your podcast. I try a lot of podcasts. I listen to a lot. I try to, listen to folks who, want me to look at their podcast and see what I can do to help them and things of that nature. And so there's a clear demarcation between those who sort of bring it on every episode and those who don't. And I think there is a need to sort of up the entertainment value sometimes for folks, even if we're just talking about energy, if you're talking about it in a news sort of format. And then the other piece of that is that, and this is sort of what we were talking about in the, as we were getting ready to get on to this, to do the show, is getting to the point. Like, don't take 20 minutes to get to the meat of the conversation. Sometimes we, do these long introductions and, let me introduce you to this person and this person and that person. And it's just like, well, if you're a regular guest of the show and you're a regular co-host of the show, I already know your name on the credits. Why don't we just start talking? Why don't we just get to it? Unless there's something special or somebody new to the group or something of that nature. So there's a lot of folks that I'm skipping the first minute and a half, 2 minutes of, just so I know. I'll give you an example. The Pod Save America people, like, you don't need to listen to the first 1 minute 45. Just start at 2 minutes. Just start there. And you'll get to the conversation, whatever it is, because they're going to do their sponsor thing. They're going to crack some terrible joke. They're going to, and then at 2 minutes, that's when they actually start their like actual conversation. So I'm one of those people that's like get to the point. Now, I'm not saying lose out on that beginning or that sort of, build up of your conversation, your topic or whatever. What I'm saying is make sure that you're bringing people right away into it. And if your podcast is so much longer, and this, again, a lot of folks are doing hour and a half, 2 hour podcasts. If your podcast is longer, make sure that you're teasing out what you're going to get to. There was a person I was talking to last week, a potential client, about their work, and they're doing 2 hour shows, and it's just like, there's no billboard at the top. You're not telling me what's coming up, and that's rough. That's hard. I got to sit through an hour and a half to know whether or not you're going to talk about my favorite sports team or, like, that's tough. So all of those things. And Lee, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting. What was the question that you asked at the top of this?
Oh, no, I was asking before
you're
from
muted.
The group is what makes for a good podcast, but you answered that. But what did you
can't
say
hear you,
there,
Lee.
Will? Oh, can you hear me? Okay.
I can hear you, Lee.
Are you good, Aisha?
You can't.
I'm good. I can hear
Okay.
you.
Zuri, can you hear us?
Hold on one second.
Oh, all right.
Let's see.
We're having some technical difficulties. That doesn't make for a good podcast. But now, as he was giving us like these tips, I was thinking about how we can improve. Our start of the show. Next time, what we can do. We're getting some tips. We've only been doing this for like a few months now, right?
Yes, it's end of January.
So we're taking notes too.
Okay, I can hear you. Yeah,
you can hear us. So Lee, what was that question again? I forgot now.
Oh, no worries. Hey, Zuri. So I guess
welcome back.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No problem.
Oh, no worries. The the question was, what makes for a good podcast? But I believe you answered that. So I guess another viewer question was, how should someone go about looking for podcast gigs? Should they look to be like video or audio editors? What sort of things help people get those podcast jobs?
Yeah, so this industry is really project oriented, right? So if you can demonstrate that you've got projects that you've done in the past that you can showcase in any kind of way, people will certainly gravitate toward that work, and you'll be able to, you know, sort of leverage that for opportunities. Upwork, Fiverr, all those places will sort of let you sort of freelance as an audio editor, and you can continue to sort of build on that sort of work for greater projects and for clients and for things of that nature. For looking for jobs in NPR member stations or for some of these corporate clients or these networks and agencies, there are certainly a lot of audio producer gigs that are out there. And again, demonstrating that you have that skill. And so many of the folks on here are journalists or journalism agents close to the industry in some kind of way, whether they're PR professionals or whatever else. You have these skills of storytelling and writing and all of these things, and adding that bit, if you will, of audio editing and multi-track editing to the mix, and saying that you've done this podcast or you've done that, I think puts you in a greater position to land a role than you might suspect.
I have a question following up with that one. I've seen opportunities with, say, like Spotify or Google or another large company, you know, looking to, you know, like a competition where they're looking for like the best podcast idea. Do you think those are worth trying out for those who are interested?
Yeah, if you can get it. You talk about some of the most major companies right there. And you know, the funny thing is the folks at Spotify, I believe the executive producer there, I believe, is a Black woman. A Black woman runs Stitcher as the executive producer there. So some of these companies, you know, they have people that are in the NABJ network. That are some people that you could potentially run into at the NABJ conference. I know we're doing it virtually this upcoming summer, but these are opportunities that are there. And I would just also note that, you know, we were talking about some of the newer platforms, and, you know, Clubhouse being one of them as a great marketing tool. One, there's a lot of discussions about podcasting within Clubhouse, and actually some of these folks, these producers, these heads of these studios at these major companies, they take part in those conversations, and it's a good thing to join and be a part of those conversations and put your name on the radar there. And they're always looking for new shows and new talent.
And
I'm just curious. I'm just interested. Sorry, Aisha. Are you using a specialized microphone now?
Yeah, I got a.
It sounds good.
I can see a little bit of it.
This is the Blue Yeti X, so it's like one step up from the Blue Yeti regular. No. This is like the USB mic. It's decent for this kind of situation because it can sit outside of the camera view. But then I also have a Shure MV7 over here, which is definitely what I use for voiceovers and podcasting. And I think that's a much more appropriate for many people who are like myself with small kids in the house and, you know, that have that kind of situation going.
And sorry, one more question, Aisha. I was just thinking, you know, some people, podcasting is not easy. Some people just think they can get on, you know, and talk, and that's not good enough. You should have a reason, right? Like a theme to your podcast, a mission. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, actually, that's a big part of where many of the conversations start and end with potential clients, where we start talking about sort of, well, where do you want to go with this? Like, it's not just a matter of, you know, I have, you know, thoughts I want to get out there, but it's like, well, how are you going to sustain this? And there's actually a lot of data to back this up that, you know, I think there's something like 36%. And don't quote me off that because I was just looking at these stats a couple of weeks ago. But there's a good percentage of podcasts that never make it past episode 1. And part of that is the time invested in taking to edit and mix it and get it together. There's a difficulty there, a learning curve there, certainly. And then there's the burnout or fatigue that comes from trying to figure out episode ideas, or, you know, the fact that you may or may not have a reliable co-host, or a sort of any kind of structure to what you're doing that allows for you to sustain it over a period of time. And so, you know, I've been talking to a lot of different brands. You know, what we talk about is not just that we want to sort of talk about things that are related, if you will, to your subject area, but really sort of building out those subcategories of your subject expertise. So that way, you know, that maybe this week you're going to get into your main topic, which is, you know, old school hip hop or whatever it is. But this week you're going to, you know, talk with graffiti artists. Like, that's like something that you have to think about in terms of just your overall planning and what kind of audiences you're trying to hit. And it's not too dissimilar from a radio show in that respect, that you're always sort of producing and thinking about the next show and thinking about what you're able to sort of provide viewers, listeners that would be entertained by that in your target audience.
Isn't that journalism in general, whether you're print or digital? That's what we do. We have, you know, you're only as good as your last story. So you're always having to think ahead and plan. And, you know, in a sense, you know, we're our own bookers in terms of like getting sources and doing all of that stuff. So it seems like it's just an extension of what we already do as journalists.
Absolutely, Aisha. And I would just say that the added part that makes it a job for me is that it's like project management too, right? It's taking it from that idea to life, to fruition, and then ensuring that it maintains itself throughout the course of its existence, whether it's a seasonal thing, 8 episodes or whatever, or if you're trying to do it every single week, 52 weeks a year. Let's talk about it. So yeah.
You know, if someone wanted to, I know you mentioned when I brought up Spotify and the larger organizations, but if someone wanted to pitch a podcast idea to someone, and what would be like the best way to do that pitch in terms of like what type of research should they do? What should they consider if they want to pitch an idea, a podcast idea?
So one, they should probably first demonstrate that they have some kind of audience. They should know who those folks are in some kind of way. And there's all kinds of places to get metrics for that, whether it's Apple's dashboard or Spotify's own dashboard, which will tell you things like the gender and age distribution and all that stuff, and geographical distribution of where people live. So you gather that data, and I would say actually put together a media kit. This is not dissimilar from YouTubers who do this as well. You put together those media kits, and you're able to take that to a brand or to a network or whoever it may be, and you say, look, I've got this show, I've done this thing, or I've already got some demonstration of work here. Let me tell you what I can do for you guys. And sometimes it's a concept, sometimes it starts much earlier on. And that's something that you want to make sure that you have a relationship with. So again, the Clubhouse thing I mentioned, it's good to sort of get to know those folks and meet those people in these different spaces. So that way, if you want to pitch the concept and say, hey, this is, sort of, I know I can do this, I've got this in my history or my background or whatever, would you guys be interested in developing something like this? That's certainly a way for it as well. I would say it's less likely, but it's still a good way to sort of push yourself forward and put yourself out there.
Now, would you do it like, so would they do it like if it was their own company, sort of like how you set up your own company, or would they look to be an employee? Like, what if they wanted to be an entrepreneur like you are and, have their own production company or whatever have you? Would they approach you like they're looking for a partnership, or how would you recommend them pitching their idea?
Yeah, so actually there's a real conversation that's going on right now about sort of intellectual property and making sure that you're owning the IP for your podcast and whatnot. There certainly was some very big issues that popped up, for instance, with Spotify and some of the creators that were on at Gimlet Media, for instance. So, I do think that it's important that if you go into any conversation with a network or agency and you're pitching your podcast, that you're protecting yourself and you're protecting your intellectual property. And if that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be formed as an LLC or anything like that, but you should consult with a lawyer. You should consult with somebody who knows contracts, so that way you're not going forward and giving up the whole barn just so you can get out there. Because, some of these shows and some of these more highly produced shows are certainly being made into movies. They're being made into other kinds of scripts, TV shows. I think of Dirty John with the LA Times, and I think of some other sort of major sort of productions that are underway, and you don't want to lose out on being able to make money off that. And so that's something that you have to consider at the start rather than, at the end. And I think those journalists and those folks that realize that they, didn't negotiate or didn't have a lawyer review it at the beginning time, they really regret that at this point in time. That's something that I think if you Google around and look for it, you'll see that there's a lot of anger about what's occurred here.
Okay. So I guess I'll transition to another aspect of podcasts is, what's some of your favorite podcasts? What's some things that you listen to? And we can go around to like Aisha and Will, because I know Ebony K. Williams, Holding Court is one of my favorites. I listen to hers every week, or Joy Taylor's podcast, or Jamel Hill is Unbothered. Those are ones that sort of stand out to me.
Yeah, I like Jamel Hill's podcast. A lot of good people. So I am a big newsy podcast. So I listen to a lot of the Daily, Axios Today, the Journal, the BBC's Global News podcast, Post Reports. So I got all of those. But then I also listen to Still Processing. I love Wesley Morris and Jen Wortham. Wesley and I worked together when we were at the Globe, and I think the world of him. And I think he's introduced me to Jenna through this podcast, and I think the world of her. And so I absolutely love that. I've been enjoying A Word with Jason Johnson out of Slate. He just started this about a month or so ago. He's an MSNBC contributor and a professor at Morgan State University. So I think that podcast has been pretty good. I'm a big fan of Masters of Scale with Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn, founder of LinkedIn. It's about entrepreneurship and business. It's great storytelling. It's great sound design. Somebody asked about what makes a great podcast. Sound design will help. That'll help a lot. I've been listening to Bloomberg's The Paycheck, which has been diving deep this season about the reason why there's this disparity in wealth for Black Americans versus everybody else. There's just been so many good episodes out of that. So I've been enjoying that a lot. I could go on. I'm listening right now to the Improvement Association, which is the new New York Times one about the voter fraud that actually occurred in 2018 in North Carolina when I was there. And it happened to be Republicans that were committing that voter fraud. And it's sort of unwinding right now. I'm only on episode 2. There's 5 chapters already out though. But yeah, that I just threw a lot at you, but that's a little bit of my listening. I've also got some weird ones in here. I'm gonna hold back.
Will, do you have any, or Aisha, do you have any that you will recommend as well?
I Still Processing. The Read. I as I mentioned before we hopped on, that I played that while I'm cleaning up around the house and everything. Read This, Read That, which is Joy Reid and Jackie Reed, and a couple of others. Demetria Lucas. What's Demetria's? Ratchet and Respectable. So I like, and she told a good story. This Chicago history one. There's one that's in my queue with the local journalist who's retired. I just forgot her name, but about journalism. One of my professors at Northwestern, she just launched a podcast, which is in my queue, also about Black women, I think Black female newsroom leaders. So that's in my queue. It's a bunch of them.
Oh, you gotta share that with me. I wanna hear that one.
Yeah, I wanna hear that, Dr. Ava Thompson Greenwell. So I need to, that's in my queue too. So there's a bunch, and like I said, I listen to them while I'm cleaning up in the house or while I'm driving.
So I'm a little embarrassed to say I don't listen to any podcasts. I need to. My wife talks about podcasts all the time, and I've been planning to get into it, and this has inspired me to take a listen. I just have such a short attention span that I don't even really watch TV besides some sports, or movies. So
I'm there with you. Actually, I don't watch much TV. I just watch a little bit of news, and so the podcast is actually something I'm doing while I'm doing something else. Right.
And I listen to a lot of music, so I can listen to podcasts when I'm like working out this has inspired me. I was kind of quiet over here. I was afraid. I know Lee was trying to go around. That's why I was silent, because I was like, should I just lie? Or just like name some ones that you all just named and I just play along. I decided, you were talking about in a podcast, authenticity is extremely important. So I just thought I should be authentic in that moment and be true to myself.
What music are you listening to then? Give us the music. Is it some Meg Thee Stallion?
No, the other Meg Thee Stallion of gospel, Shirley Caesar.
I like Shirley, but I'm
a good choice. Yeah, I didn't know.
No, just all kinds. I like 90s R&B and hip hop, so I mostly listen to that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I listen to that while I'm working out. So I had a great workout today, and I was getting my guy and Rex in Effect and Digital Underground. Listen to all of that while I was working out, because I need to.
Yes.
I'm on that Stairmaster. I need to be motivated because I just want to hunch over and give up, but I had to keep it up.
Yeah.
I know we're about to wrap up soon. Just final question from me is, how can we improve what we're doing here? Give us some tips. Grade us on our performance today.
Well,
nice.
First of all, I always love thinking of doing lives, but I think of them very differently than I think of podcasts, right? And I do think that there is a tension there between doing live video and live streaming and doing podcasts. And part of that is because there is this element of a technical glitch. I had mine with the headphones. Sorry about that. And there's the other part of it is like, well, what can you sort of add to it? What kind of flourish can you do with it if you're not given a chance to produce it, right? If you're not given a chance to work with the audio. So I think that's always something to think about. Like, okay, we're doing live, let's do that. But is it the same thing? And I want you guys to think about it in those terms. I do think that it's a great conversation. And this is a great way to just chop it up with some guest, whoever it may be, and just dig deep on a subject that you guys are interested in. This is wonderful. So don't overthink this. This is you're in a good place, if you will. The preferences that I have, if you will, for that sort of more produced sort of feel is my preferences alone, I think.
Yeah, I've been afraid we were gonna get canceled, but we're lasting. We're playing it month by month. The executives, they want more viewers, but we're trying. So I think they're giving us like a couple more months, and then otherwise we might be fired.
And in the event that may happen, just bring them fired. So what about people who do you have any advice, Zuri, for people who are struggling with the decision to strike out on their own? So not necessarily fired, but just not like how you were unhappy. And that's nothing wrong. Hey, it happens. And so, but people who
0 out of 10, I would not recommend.
Right, but things happen, and so if they're
let me say this: life happens, and again, it's not anecdotal to me. It's something that happens whether you're laid off, whether you transition to another job and you realize it's not it. You realize that you want to do something else and that you want to take more control of your career. And so I think there's a lot of us that are sort of worried about, well, how am I going to pay my bills? And that is a real fear. And part of, losing your job and having that fear as well motivates you to go find that money wherever it is and get on it. And
where the money resides.
There is a certain kick in the tail that occurs that certainly happens in this situation. But if you already feel it in your gut that you got to get out of this job because it's driving you crazy, that it's hurting you, that it's causing harm or something of that nature, then you are better off to move to another job or strike out on your own. And I would argue that for those who are thinking about it, who are weighing it, who are really sort of searching their soul, that they should probably start that on the side first, right? Start tinkering around and sort of seeing what they can do for themselves on the side first and develop it into something that maybe might be able to take over full time for you. It's always the best thing is to start it on the side first.
Just want to ask you really quick, Zuri, is we talked a lot about the hustle and the grind of it. Can you talk about the joy? So when you get on that podcast, you just like, yes, that light comes on. Are you excited? Is it joyous?
Yeah, you know, I'm super critical of myself, so I don't know if I'm that joyous. But yeah, I think there's a lot of joy that I get out of helping others, right? And so it's fun for me to talk with creators who are thinking about ways to help the world and help others and help talk about stories that are untold. And, you know, I've been having this conversation with a client about regenerative agriculture. And not a lot of people understand the sort of where that sort of lands in terms of climate change and the effect on livestock and on desertification that occurs across the world. And so there's a lot of work that's done there. And it just inspires me, sort of helping that person frame their podcast and what they're doing. So there's a lot of joy in the work itself. I do appreciate it. I'm talking to a client who has raises funds for others. That's literally her job. She is a business coach and a crowdfunder. She helps people raise money for their businesses. And, you know, she's actually somebody who was in the Chicago market some time ago. And it's such a fun thing to talk with her about her clients, because all of them have great stories about what they're trying to do when they raise that money, what business they're going to launch, who they're going to help, this nonprofit that they're trying to run, or this product that they're trying to put out into the world. So there's all these things that are sort of like available to me now that are, I think, richer, more fuller stories than sometimes the daily news and politics grind that I was in the past. So I get a lot of joy out of that.
That's good to know. Because I understand the daily grind. Yeah. You know, that's, you know, especially in working in news and.
Well, you know, I mean, that last week or whatever it was when all those Black people were shot, I just, you know, like it hits you, like you're feeling that on a level. And if you are in the news business, like so many people in this chat are, that, you know, starts to affect you after a while. Right. And, you know, I mean, I've been in the game for a little bit now. But, you know, you think about that and you think about if you're putting all your energy into responding to these moments and these issues and these incidents, like that can take from you. Yeah. That can take from you and your ability to respond. I think in a humane way, it may either, you know, you change, which is what I'm trying to say. And it's a tough change. And so to be able to think about things and work on things that don't really take from you in that way, but really give to you, maybe inspire you. I think that's what it's fun for me.
And we talked about that very point when Will and I, we were on the panel with a couple of other local journalists about mental health, you know, in Chicago's journalists. And we talked about that point to just the impact, especially that, you know, covering certain stories may have for a lot of us in Chicago, you know, gun violence with people who look like ourselves. You know, for me, I edit these stories, I'm rewriting them and all of this stuff. And it's constant, you know, either reading a Wire stories or whatever. So, you know, it does have an impact. And I'm glad that people are more open to acknowledging that it has an impact and, you know, and being able to address it, because it does, you know.
Yeah. You know, one of the first shootings that I covered in my newsroom was the death of Oscar Grant in Oakland. And I was still in California, and it was the first time, I think, for me and for quite a number of other people, that it was on video in such a way that, you know, spread on social media in such a way. And so to go from Oscar Grant to, you know, George Floyd to all these people in this last week, and it seems like it's never ending. And so at a certain point, as a journalist, you feel like, I got to get off this train. I got to think about something else. You know, I got to tune out. I've got people in the newsroom who don't watch the news when they're not, you know, on the job. And that tells you something, right? It's like, I can't even deal with my job outside of this organization. And I didn't want to be there, but that's where I ended up anyways.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, this was such a great conversation. Appreciate your time, President Biden. is about to deliver his speech to
yes.
Congress. So we're all gonna get to that. I'm sure I have to do it
Back
for
to
work
work.
purposes. But yeah, I appreciate your time. This was an excellent discussion, and we learned a lot. And I'm gonna take some of your tips and listen to some of your podcast recommendations.
Yeah. Have fun.
Great advice, Zuri. I mean, you really I know it's counting back with some of those questions, but I was channeling what others, wanted to know. So thank you for sharing your.
And we went long today, like Sunday service. We were supposed to only be 30 minutes.
I know. Zuri, you would drop.
I told you I was ready for an hour.
Yeah.
Zuri dropped all those beautiful gems. Thank you so much, Zuri.
Well, thank you for having me, and much appreciated. And looking forward to hearing from you guys and hearing the audio version of this.
Right.
Exactly.
Don't judge us, it's live.
All right.
Thanks.
Take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.